Market to competition to reduce the strategic importance of oil and the ability of oil price spikes to wreak havoc on our economy. There is a bill called the Open Fuel Standard Act, introduced by Congressman Shimkus and Congressman Engel, that are right here to make a few opening comments. And the focus of the bill is ensuring that new cars enable fuel competition of some sort. After the congressmen say their words, we're going to turn to a panel of speakers, and I'll introduce them after the congressmen speak. Okay, so let me introduce our speakers. Thank you to the congressmen. Our speakers first are Robert Zubrin, who is author of a book some of you may have read called Energy Victory, Winning the War on Terror by Breaking Free of Oil. Next we have General Wesley Clark. Frank Gaffney, who runs the Center for Security Policy, which is one of the preeminent think tanks focused on security and defense thinking in this town. General Wesley Clark, who was the Supreme Commander of NATO and now runs Growth Energy, which is focused on really alternative to oil and specifically ethanol. And then Jim Woolsey, who was former director of Central Intelligence and has really been one of the leading thinkers on energy security issue for a very long time.
Thank you. Thanks to all of you for turning out to hear about this subject, which I think is extremely important. I think that the future of the nation depends on adequate resolution of this issue. So, in view of the fact that time is relatively short, let's flip forward to the chart, the next chart, Okay, let's start with this. Okay, right now, everybody is concerned about high oil prices and high gas prices, and rightly so, as I'll show you very shortly. But first of all, let's try to understand why oil prices are so high. It is because of a cartel called OPEC. And here is the proof. These two graphs here show non-OPEC and OPEC oil production and price from 1973 to the near present. Okay, price for both is the same. There's one world oil price, okay, with very little difference. But the production situation is totally different. Between 73 and today, non-OPEC oil production doubled, which is what you'd expect because the world economy has doubled over the same period. But look at OPEC oil production. It's up, it's down, it's here, it's there, it's all over the place. It shows no rational trend at all. That shows tactical manipulation of the market. But what's even more remarkable about this is, look at this. In 1973, OPEC oil production was 30 million barrels a day. Right now, it is 30 million barrels a day. That is after a third of a century, during which time the world economy has doubled in size, OPEC production has not increased at all. That is incredible. If you look at the previous 30 years, from the end of World War II to 1973, OPEC didn't exist at the end of World War II, but the countries that became OPEC, their total production increased more than tenfold over the previous third of the century. Okay? Because at that time, the oil production of the soon-to-be OPEC countries was under the control of the Seven Sisters, the multinational oil companies. And I don't have a lot of kind things to say about the Seven Sisters, but I'll give them this. They had a policy which was to anticipate future demand, invest, drill more oil, ramp up production to meet the needs of increasing demand, and match the tremendously growing demand of the post-war world economy. And so, people today say, well, the reason why oil prices are shooting up is because of increased demand in China, and there certainly is increased demand in China over the past decade. But increased demand globally in the late 40s, 50s, and 60s was much greater. We had rates of economic growth, 5–6% globally. Rebuilding Europe, transforming America from Depression America to Suburbia America, industrializing Korea, Taiwan, all this stuff going on. Okay? And yet, from 1947 to 1972, world oil prices adjusted for inflation were absolutely flat within 1 to 2%. Okay? Because they were increasing production. Since 73, they haven't increased production, despite the fact that they're sitting on top of 80% of the world's oil reserves, including all the easiest to drill stuff. So what OPEC is like, it's like a cruel dog owner who puts a collar nice and tight around the neck of a puppy and leaves it set there while the dog grows. So the collar gets tighter and tighter and tighter until the dog chokes. And somebody comes along and says, well, you know, it's just the growth of the dog that killed the dog. No, it wasn't, it was the collar. Dogs grow, that's what they're supposed to do. Okay, it's the collar that choked the dog. Okay, and that's what we're dealing with here. Now let's go to the next chart. Now let's look at the effect of this. This chart here compares oil prices adjusted for inflation from 1970 to today with U.S. unemployment rates. And what you can see here is every time the price of oil goes up, U.S. unemployment shoots up. Happened here in 73. It happened in 79. It happened in a smaller way in 1991 in conjunction with the activity around the first Iraq War. It happened again after 9/11, and it happened in a huge way in 2008. Okay, when oil went to $140 a barrel, 5 million Americans lost their jobs. So you got to understand this. That when oil goes up, the issue is not that gas goes from $2.50 to $3.25 and you have to pay a little more at the pump. Okay, the issue is what it does as a macroeconomic tax on the U.S. economy as a whole. Okay, the United States is the world's largest oil importer. Okay, this year we're going to import we're going to use 7 billion barrels of oil, of which 5 billion, give or take, are going to be imported. That's $100 oil, that's $500 billion on our balance of payment deficit. Okay, in 2003 we had $20 oil. So that's a difference of $80 times 5 billion. That's $400 billion tax out of the U.S. economy. That's a tax. It's a $400 billion tax. It's equal to a 16% increase in income taxes. $400 billion is 1/6 of what all Americans pay in taxes, except it's not paid to the U.S. government, which might use it to buy services and build things in the United States. No, it's paid to Uncle Saud and Uncle Hugo and Uncle Ahmadinejad. Okay, so this is removed directly from our economy. $400 billion taken from our economy is equal to 4 million jobs at $100,000 a year each. Okay, that's what we're dealing with here. And if you look at out-of-control oil prices, we're looking at no escape from recovery. Now, after the 2008 crash, oil dropped all the way down to $40 because world demand collapsed. And so oil price just dropped like a rock. But as soon as the economy began to recover a bit, in late 2009, 2010, oil price shot right back up and now it's above $100 again. And unless the situation is remedied, we're looking at another drop, okay? Probably in around 3 to 6 months, I would guess, based on past history. Next chart. Now, when we talk about oil, people ordinarily think of the threat of an embargo. Could we have another one? Yeah. Could it be as bad as 73, 74? No, it would be much worse, because now instead of 30% dependent on foreign oil, we're 60% dependent on foreign oil, due to a complete failure of policy in this country in the years since the first time we were put on notice we had a problem here. Okay, next chart. Okay, but there's even a bigger threat, which is huge amounts of money are being shifted from the West to the Gulf, and they're going into gigantic sovereign wealth funds. Saudis putting together $900 billion sovereign wealth funds. Other OPEC powers putting together sovereign wealth funds of $100 billion class or better to use to execute corporate takeovers in Europe and the United States. And this is a real threat to our sovereignty. And you have to understand, this is a much bigger threat. A lot of this money, goes to fund terror, as everybody here knows. But in fact, you could crash every airplane in the world into buildings in the United States, and when the bombardment was over, the Republic would still stand. Okay, but if people come in here with money and take over leading institutions, leading media, for example, and major corporations, or simply get influence within them, and they can control their lobbies, they can affect our political system, for instance, in ways to prevent us from ever breaking out of this stranglehold. So this is something that really needs to be taken seriously. Next chart. Now, what's the answer here? Okay. We have to break the hold that OPEC has on the world's liquid fuel supplies. Now, it certainly helps to drill more. I'm all for drilling more. I'm for the Keystone Pipeline. I'm for all this stuff, but it's not enough. Okay, they've got control of 80% of the world's petroleum resources, despite all the drilling that people have done, the doubling of non-OPEC oil production, in fact. Oil prices have shot up, okay, and they can still control this game. So we have to open up the rules here and bring in things that they don't control. Now these are fuels made from non-petroleum sources, and these are alcohols, which include ethanol, which can be readily made from various kinds of biomass and crops, okay, and also methanol.